Cool. Well, welcome. I'm Allie from O2X here with one of our injury prevention and strength and conditioning specialists, Bruce Stockton. So excited to kind of chat about injury prevention, injury risk reduction, and then all things strength and conditioning. I know it's something that I have always been given a training program to do and very little knowledge of, like, here's why it's periodized and here's why you do week 1, week 2, week 3. So I'm excited to hear from you. But Bruce, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what you do with O2X, and how you got into all this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I got my start back in college playing rugby. I had been a swimmer and a runner in high school, skinny, lanky kid, and then went and decided to play a very physical sport. So got into strength conditioning that way. Naturally found myself in the PT's room with some injuries along the way, and just got really, really interested in how do we improve performance, how do we make people more resilient against a very unpredictable environment like a rugby match. So went out and got my CSCS, worked as a strength coach for a little bit, and in the meantime was getting a little more into the nitty gritty of the higher end. I'd been in the PT and was learning more and more about that side of things, and I began to see a lot of PTs were really good at implementing strength conditioning, and a lot of PTs were not so good at strength conditioning. So someone like a high level rugby athlete, I don't want to go to a physical therapist that says, hey, here's this little yellow band, please just, do some side steps, and then there you go, back to the rugby field. So that really motivated me to go back, get my doctorate of physical therapy from Boston University, and try and really live in the middle of that spectrum where we rehab when it's time, but when it's time to go, we go, and we get those people back to that high level, whether it's athletics, whether it's tactical athletes, living on the high end of that performance spectrum. So currently, I should say, I do what is called travel physical therapy. So I'll do 13-week contracts, different places in high areas of need. So right now I am between contracts on those, and I'm hanging out down here in North Carolina, writing up some programs, strength conditioning programs for O2X for some of our shift worker populations right now.
Cool. Yeah, one thing, we were talking about this earlier, but when you're looking at working with a tactical athlete population versus a traditional athlete population where you have more of like a cycle of on season, off season, how do you think about creating those? We were talking, it's not week 1, week 2, week 3 of a program, but how do you think about working with a shift of a tactical athlete when you're programming something?
Yeah, there's a lot of new considerations, right? If we talk about someone who is a higher level traditional athlete from whether it's a collegiate or professional, their job is to eat, sleep, train, right? They have a lot of things laid out for them. They have a ton of support, whether it's medical staff, strength conditioning staff, recovery, all these sorts of things. And they also have very predictable seasons, very predictable. We know when they're going to sleep, when they're going to be on competition, traveling, etc. Tactical athletes, not so much, right? They could be, who knows where. It could be a 24 at the firehouse. It could be overseas serving in a combat area. Not exactly sure with all those variables. So you need to build in a lot more wiggle room, I like to call it. So if it's somebody, for example, who is a firefighter who's working, let's say, a 24-48 kind of schedule, I'm not going to program a heavy workout for that person the day of or the day after their shift. They're going to be drained from a nervous system perspective, right? There's going to be just an increased risk of injury. We actually know from the literature in traditional athletics that folks who sleep less than 7 hours a night do have the following, if they play a game the following day, a significantly higher risk of injury the day after lack of sleep. So the last thing I want to do is throw somebody who just came off a 24 straight into a heavy kind of workout. So what I'll do is I'll program roughly light, moderate, or heavier days on that schedule. And I want your heavy day to come at least one day after your shift, right? The day after a shift, usually what I'll do is I'll program something like some low intensity cardio, right? Let's get the heart going. Let's just get you moving a little bit and kind of gauging how the body's feeling. And then I'll usually program an optional day on that. So if you want to do a lighter band workout, more from the recover standpoint, nothing's going to be too taxing, happy to go do that. But at the same time, if you're feeling toast, if you didn't sleep more than 2 hours the previous 24, take an off day. Go out, go for a walk, get a little cardio in, but don't try and go hit the gym and do something crazy. Let's save that for a little farther away from the shift workers.
Yeah, makes sense. I think so that lack of sleep really comes into play especially with the tactical athletes.
It's huge. And Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
One of the things that's important on that standpoint is not everybody is always going to be able to plan for that. And we know that sometimes we got to give the body what it needs, right? If sometimes I'm sure everyone has experienced this, they've walked into the gym for a workout, they're feeling awesome, everything is great, and they have a terrible workout. Sometimes you walk into the gym, you're feeling terrible, and suddenly things click and you just have a really good workout for some reason, right? So I like to build in to that system, give the body what it's going to need. A lot of times going and doing some recover work and some really light cardio is more beneficial to the health of the entire person than to go and further crush them, right? If you're already like at a 2 out of a 10 as far as how you're feeling that day, me knocking you down to a 0 out of 10 with a hard workout is only going to further crush the physical and the mental state of that person.
Yeah, I think we get into this, like, every workout has to leave you sweaty and sore pretty easily these days. It's like you have a tough day at work and all you want to do is just go crush yourself at the gym, when really you're totally depleting your nervous system, and what you really needed was probably some yoga and stretching. But
yeah, exactly. And one of the things, again, I talk about it a lot, the difference between the advantage that a traditional professional athlete has over a tactical athlete is, apart from the whole, doctors, chiros, physios that they have available to them to work out, they have a lot of technology that's able to track recovery. So they're wearing heart rate monitors, right? Looking at heart rate variability. They're doing testing before they go into the weight room, and they know that if John Doe over there usually has a solid hand strength and solid grip strength, right? And I test you and you're super weak today, I'm not going to throw you to the wolves and do that. Tactical athletes don't have that luxury, right? It's all right, when it's time to go, you have to go. I can't say, oh, you know what, take today off. It's just not an option.
Yeah. What's one thing, so if a tactical athlete doesn't really have a biofeedback way to test their kind of recovery state, what's one thing you would recommend looking at in terms of, if you show up on shift and you're like, I got to do my PT today, but I might not be feeling top of my game. What's that, or one or two things you would maybe have people look for in terms of where they are in recovery?
That's a great question. One of the things that some people can gauge at a baseline, some people are more in tune with this than others, is resting heart rate. So if I wake up and I normally I'm at like 58 BPMs, right, when I wake up out of bed. If I wake up out of bed first thing and I think I slept well, but I'm in the high 60s or 70s, that's a sign that, okay, like I'm not recovered, right? So if you're in tune with that with yourself, then that's an easy way to do it. You can get some very easy heart rate monitors off your phone. That'll just, you put your finger up to the camera and it'll give you your heart rate and you can track it that way. The just stupid easiest method that's actually backed up in the research is grip strength, like I said. So if I know that usually one of your guys has a crushing handshake and he comes in and he just like has nothing there, that's a really good sign that from a physical / mental standpoint, the CNS is just not, your nervous system is just not having it that day. Probably best to back it off. If you go in and things that usually should feel light are feeling super heavy, and this is after warm up, right? Obviously, if you go in, sometimes you warm up, you're not feeling great, and the warm up kicks you into gear, and you're like, no, I'm good. If you start warming up and it's still not happening, might be a better day to back things off and either skip the workout, go for more of the recover, the yoga, the stretching, the foam rolling, the down regulation, that kind of thing. Or if you want to still lift weights, yeah, if your program calls for something heavy, back it off, right? You don't need to, it doesn't need to be whatever the percentage is. It's very easy to go in and say, this is what feels heavy to me today. It's still going to be just as demanding for your body to go with what it feels is heavy that day versus what is potentially going to be something that's not reachable for you on that day.
Yeah. So you bring up this idea of your warm up, right? And I think one of the questions I hear a lot from first responders is, well, if I can't warm up when the tones go off or when I get a call, why would I warm up before I do a workout if that's not like a realistic situation? So one, what would you say to that? And two, are there ways that people can start shifting their perspective of why you might warm up or how you might be able to warm up, in those like split second reaction time moments?
Yeah, I hear that question at seminars quite a bit, and a lot of times the guy going, trying to get out of the warm up. I don't need to do that because the tone, it's whatever. So one of the things that I love about being an injury prevention guy and a strength guy is that I feel like I have a unique position to be able to give the why, right? People, if you don't give them a good reason to do something, at least me, if you just say, hey, do that, well, I want to know the why behind it. So one of the big things that we talk about is the more prepared you are for any situation, the higher your capacity, so to speak, the easier everything else will be, right? So there are controllables and there are non-controllables. Things that happen on shift, on a call, those are all non-controllables. I can't prepare you for what you might encounter in the field, right? What I can do is make sure that you are going into that at the highest level of readiness that you can. So the big thing I always relate to the guys in the firehouse is how many of you guys would feel comfortable walking into the gym and hitting 95% of your max bench press? No warm up, you just go in at 8 in the morning and hit that. And most people are obviously not a good move, right? One, not sure you can do that without warming up. And two, is we all know that's a pretty high injury risk to just go in and do that. So what I always go in at is, what if we had somebody who had a bench of 200 and someone who has a bench of 300, right? And the weight on the bar is 190. Well, the guy who has a max bench of 200 is going to have a lot harder time at 190 than the guy with a max at 300. So similar situation, that's a very basic example. What you need to do in the field, I want your reserve to be so far above what you typically encounter, right? Obviously, there's going to be some variables, some of those crazier calls where things happen and just mostly out of the ordinary. But a lot of times we can make sure that what you're encountering from a field standpoint is well below your level of readiness, right? That's also from a strength and an endurance standpoint. So if, let's go back to that bench example, just because it's a very easy thing I think a lot of people can identify with. If I put 150 on the bar, right, and I say, I want you to just do as many reps as you can, you have 40 minutes, right? As much rest as you want, break it up however you want from a repetition standpoint. Well, the guy who has a max of 300 is going to do a hell of a lot more reps than the guy at 200. Same thing if you're on a call, right, and you're on a call that takes, let's say, an hour and a half because things are getting intense. Somebody that has a much higher preparedness over that time, everything about that call is going to be easier. They're working at a very low percentage of their total capability. So they are a better asset to themselves. They're a better asset to those that they're trying to help. They're a better asset to their teammates, right? The last thing you want is to be the one that is bringing down the rest of your team. And a lot of times we've heard from our tactical athletes, why do you train, right? Not everyone is like, I love working out. No, not everyone does, but a lot of the guys are doing it because they don't want to be the one that when shit hits the fan, they're the one holding the team back, right? They want to be prepared for it.
Yeah, I think that we talk about that a lot in the mental performance too. It's like you have to train your default mode almost. So the higher your default mode is, the better you're gonna be prepared for those pressures. The pressure doesn't feel quite as much. So
yeah, absolutely.
Same idea. Very cool. I think one thing you brought up a little bit when we were talking earlier is this idea. So if routines are changed, which they are right now, everyone's kind of doing home gyms or makeshift gyms, or the call volume's really high or has shifted from what it normally is. You were talking a little bit about how do we start to get to a new normal and not like injure ourselves as more equipment becomes available, or as we're like ordering new equipment online to try to get delivered to our houses. Oh, sweet, I'm going to order a 100-pound sandbag and just like start going after it. What are some strategies that you would say to start kind of building new routines, but also getting back into old routines as schedules change back again?
Yeah, for sure. We know from any sport research that the biggest time that we have sort of an injury risk is when we're transitioning in the kind of training that we're doing. So we see it a lot in January, right? When all of our New Year's resolutioners hit the gym and they go from 0 to 60 as fast as they can. They just want to go 6 days a week, and I'm going to do cardio and weights and diet all at the same time. And it's a recipe for burnout, both physically and mentally, right? So what we like to do is we like to look at the big picture. And one thing that's been used in the research to look a little bit at how we manage that amount of load or workout volume, if you will, is what they call an acute versus your chronic workload. So there's some debate over this still, but at its base, it's a very easy way to say, what did I do this past week? And what did I do on average for the whole previous month, right? And what we want to see is that that 1 week that we're looking at right now isn't too much more than what I've been doing over the previous month, right? It's very easy if I go and I'm going to say, okay, I'll work out 3 days a week and I'm going to do 3 sets of 10 on something this week. Well, if I wanted to jump suddenly to 6 sets of 10 the next week and go 5 days a week, you can see how that's a huge step up increase. We want those steps to be nice and manageable on the way up. And on the same side of things, when we have a sudden drop off in training, like many folks are seeing right now without access to the usual gyms, on one hand, they're going to go into some different modalities, right? Maybe a lot more bodyweight training. We've seen on Instagram, I'm sure everybody's been tagged in about 1 million push-ups at this point, and we've seen people just cranking out push-ups that probably haven't done a ton of push-ups based on their technique and how easy it looks for them. We just want to make sure that you're listening to your body, give yourself some recovery, and the body will adapt to whatever you need it to do. You just need to understand that none of us can speed up Mother Nature. It doesn't matter how fit you are, how good you are at one thing. If I take a completely different implement or a different training style and have you go after that, we're starting not necessarily from square one, but also respect that your joints, muscles, tissues are not used to this and they'll adapt. You just need to make sure that you're giving it enough time in the meantime there.
Yeah. So I'm one of those that's been tagged in about a million push-ups and like 100 sandbag workouts. And I definitely feel it. I picked up a sandbag today and I was like, ooh, like way overdid it on the at-home fitness the other day. So
yeah,
I know that.
A good rule we like to use, we use it mostly in the rehab setting, but it also holds true pretty well if we get more into this fitness side, is we call it the 24-hour rule, right? So if somebody's injured and they have an injured body part, oftentimes it's okay to work out in the PT clinic with a little bit of discomfort, right? And it's okay to have some lingering discomfort afterwards. If 24, 36 hours passed, you still have a lot of that discomfort, we probably bit off more than we can chew from that injured area standpoint. It's just a very easy way to kind of measure recovery because not everyone responds the same way in the moment. Same thing with fitness. If you decided to just suddenly go learn how to do some Nordic hamstring curls, and then, 36, 48 hours later, your hammies are still toast, you probably started at a little higher level. Let's see how we can make it a little easier. If you just did 100 push-ups on Tuesday, and on Friday, your shoulders are still feeling really beat up, you probably went a little too hard, maybe cut that back a little bit, and give your body time to adapt to all this new stuff that we're throwing at it from a body weight calisthenics standpoint.
Yeah, that's great. That makes sense. Yeah, so I think before we wrap up, what if there's anything else you want to make sure we cover for people listening, first responders, tactical athletes, people at home, whatever, wherever they may be, anything you hope that they take away from this?
Yeah, so going back to your question about, well, if I don't warm up for that tone, why should I warm up, right? And I'm big on giving people the empowerment to know the whys. And from my perspective, why is it important to me? Why do I think it's important for you, right? I don't want to be the person that just tells you to do things. I want to be a very much coach relationship here. So one of the things that's very unique in a tactical situation versus a traditional field athlete situation is you have so many unpredictable variables, right? We talk about control the controllables, but a lot of things we can't when you're in the field. We're not sure what might get thrown at you. We're going to have a lot of funky offset loads, right? We're going to be in a ton of gear, loading you up 100 pounds plus sometimes in situations that are very much not stable, we'll say, to say the very least. So one of the things that's important about that prepare is, apart from the increasing the blood flow, core temperature, perform better during your workout, one of the things that I love to use it for is getting people to spend some time discovering positions they're not usually in. So one of the things we know, not to get too deep into the research, but from how do we learn skills? How do we learn things? We know that the people who are the most successful, whether it's Tiger Woods swinging that golf club or LeBron James, right, at the basketball, one of the things that we know the best movers, the best athletes do is that they have tried a ton of different ways to do something before they finally settle on the one, right? If you look at the research, people that are not good at learning skills, they tend to find one thing and they just keep trying to do that over and over and over and over again. People that are average, they try a few different ways and then they'll eventually settle on one. The best people, as far as a learning standpoint, are the ones who have tried so many different options that their body has figured out this is the best one and all those are not great. So how that relates to the prepare, we have you doing a lot of yoga flows, right? Getting those joints into positions they're not usually in. A lot of times at our seminars, we have guys who will walk them through a prepare and they're like, oh my God, my hips haven't done this in a year and a half. What are you trying to do to me, kind of thing, right? So the important thing is that your brain has seen what it can do. It's seen the things that are available to it from a movement standpoint. So when you're in the field, if shit hits the fan and you catch yourself in one of those positions, the brain knows that it's been there before. Even though you're not there regularly, it knows that that is an available option for it, right? Which may mean that we don't have an injury potentially when there might have been something before. It may be something where, okay, before maybe we had a serious injury that took you out of work for 2-3 weeks, and now maybe you just tweak something and you're out for a day or you just feel a little funky, right? We want to make sure that we prepare you as best we can so that you have as many options available to you to move. And that's where that prepare comes in, to show your body different things that it can do, different ways that it can move. That's also why we love at O2X, we're such a huge fans of using sandbags, kettlebells, all these offset funky implements, because we're preparing the body. That's never the same thing twice, right? If you squat with a barbell, it's pretty consistent. It's going to feel the same most of the time. That sandbag is going to shift. It's going to be on one shoulder. It's going to fall off your shoulder. Your body's just seeing so many different ways that it has to be able to control things, so that when you're in the field and shit hits the fan, your body's already been there. It already has an idea of how to control these things.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good place to leave people. I think just always be ready for the next thing. And I like your analogy with the bench press of kind of preparing for the worst case scenario by getting way higher than you think you'll ever see in the field, which is a good way to train.
Yeah, one quote that I love, a guy named Dr. Andrea Spina, who is a pretty big name in the fitness and the rehab world right now. He says, you're always going to regret not training the position that you got injured in. And I just love that, because at the same time, we're out there, we're going about our day and we always feel good. But when things don't go how we expect them to, that's the true test of, has your training supported you, right? You know, a lot of folks that go into the gym and they kind of just go through the motions. And for the average Joe that works at a desk, that's probably fine. But for our folks who are going out and in sketchy situations are going to happen, we want to make sure that we have prepared you to be in all those positions. I don't want you to regret having not trained a position that eventually, heaven forbid, someone might get injured in.
Yeah, I like that quote. That's a good one. We'll leave it at this, but what's your 1% for today?
Today's 1% is we're on a, I don't want to call it a diet. I'm changing my eating strategies. So with a lot of folks in quarantine, I decided this would be a good time to read up on some more nutrition research and kind of restructure my eating program. So we have some meal prep to do. I got about 6 pounds of chicken and a few pounds of fish in the fridge, in the freezer right now. And I'm going to go chef it up.
I like it. You may have to send us some cooking videos. We'll have some nutrition specialists send you tips after your cooking videos.
Yeah, I'll probably need them.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and share this with us. And this will not be the last time. I think we can cover pretty much every aspect of injury prevention and of strength and conditioning. So don't worry. Plenty more.
I can talk all day. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Of course.